How's it going, Reef Keepers? Welcome back to another episode of We the Reefers. I wanted to start the podcast today just a little bit before the Quanta Pros kicked on so that you guys could see, with all channels cranked to 100, the appearance of the Refi Uno 2.0 Pros over the tank. I've got them on acclimation, so they're getting a little bit brighter over time. I'm loving the lights. Audio listeners, go check out, a video on my channel. I have a video up of the lights being on in all their glory so that you can, kind of just see what you could expect if you were going to run everything on 100% channels across the board. But unfortunately, it also means you guys are going to have to listen to the Neptune Apex auto feeders. At least one of them is going to roll here in a minute. So you'll get to see the fish eat if you're a visual viewer. If you're an audio viewer, you're just going to hear a horrible grinding noise in the background. And it's kind of fitting that that's going to happen here in a couple minutes because today's topic is aquarium controllers. So I had always planned on doing an episode just on aquarium controllers in general, giving my thoughts on them in general. There's enough material on aquarium controllers if there weren't any new products coming out to just talk about the whole dynamic of aquarium controllers in general. But that part of the conversation, due to the big news that happened, the last few days with regards to Hydros and Neptune specifically, the part where I kind of go through what I think of controllers will be more condensed, and then I will get into my thoughts on these new products that are going to be hitting the market. So lots going on in the controller space. There's no doubt whatsoever. I wanted to mention real quick, this week I would guess only, today is the 16th of April. You can hop on eBay, and for $115 shipped, you can the EcoFlow River 2 battery backup unit with a lithium iron phosphate battery in it. That is on sale again on eBay, certified refurbished from the manufacturer itself, with warranty and everything. So I would take advantage of that deal. If you have not gotten one yet and you were kind of waiting for that deal to roll back around, it's back around. So definitely take advantage of it. But aquarium controllers, let's kind of get into it. So the big three aquarium controllers right now, as far as I'm aware, right? Again, I'm a general hobbyist. I only have so much experience. I only have so much money to spend on controller systems. The one that I've chosen for myself, number one, is the Neptune Systems Apex, right? So I think most of you know that I run Neptune Systems on this tank that you see in front of you. And I have run it generally, and we'll get into, a little bit of humor with it, but I have generally had great success with Neptune Systems. So despite my aversion to Aperture, that's well known by this point, I still do want my incredibly expensive aquarium controller to work and want, innovation and better options to come out with regards to it, because at this point in the game, it would be a massive upheaval for me to switch controllers. So even though I don't agree with Aperture, I am still pretty steady with Neptune Systems. But we'll get into it. Other controllers out there, the CoralView Hydros, right? Which was, if you pay attention to reef industry world at all, that was this week on reefing social media, was what's going on with CoralView Hydros. So we'll get into that as well. And then, of course, and it's not even, I'm not saying it last because it's an honorable mention. It's just honorable. The GHL controller system, right? So GHL is what I have the least experience with. I have, by the way, touched and, looked at and kind of played with software with all of these systems at some point, because various LFS stores that I have, been a patron of in the past have run each one of these systems, and me being the nerd that I am, knew the staff and was able to look at these. So with regards to GHL, just kind of going back to front on that list, and GHL, in my experience, has far and away the best build quality, right? And this is I think it should be extremely important to everyone in reef keeping, the build quality behind your devices. Um, it's salt water, right? I mean, even if it's going to be in an electrical cabinet adjacent to salt water, we're still dealing with a highly corrosive substance, not a it's going to corrode something out in a flash kind of thing. But over time, just that adjacency or contact with salt environments, I mean, you see boats that have been out, to sea for 5 years without maintenance. And there's a reason the U.S. military is constantly rotating our aircraft carriers. I mean, these things need maintenance. So the build quality, I have touched and held in my hand GHL components, and I believe they're German made. Hopefully, I'm not wrong there. But German made products have a great reputation for build quality generally, and this is not an exception to that rule. The build quality of a piece of GHL equipment is, in my unesteemed opinion, vastly superior to the average build quality of a piece of Neptune Systems gear. It just is. Um, Hydros, which I would say I have the least hands-on experience with Hydros. I've played with the software. I've stood and looked at the components that were mounted to a board. And I've recently had, one of my close buddies in the hobby, Gomi of Gomi's Reef. He kind of described to me we had a lengthy conversation about how Hydros functions. I'm considering getting a small Hydros unit just to gain familiarity with it on my 25-gallon Nano. So he kind of walked me through the long and the short of how you have to kind of think about Hydros, right? And one of the weird things about Hydros, whenever I would look at them in the past, I always felt like, well, there's not a great launch point. Like I would look at the bevy of offerings that they have, because there are so many pieces of this system that are doing so many interesting but also a little confusing array of things or packages of things that they're capable of, that I was always a little hesitant. I would look at it and be like, this is pretty cool looking, and it does some unique things, and it does some things that, I think are better than Neptune Systems, but ultimately, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And then I would just kind of shy away from it and say, I'll come back to that. And I think that this lack of launch point was partially addressed, ironically enough, by the launch, right? Their recent product, the launch, which we're not going to talk about a whole lot. It's probably unfair, but there's too much to cover. We're gonna talk about auto testing products specifically that came out this past few days. Um, but that launch point, I think, was sort of fulfilled. And once you have they always, so Hydros users call their collection of various, I'm going to use Neptune's systems name here, but modules, the different module setup that they have, they refer to it as their collective, right? So you have this collective of bits and pieces of gear that can jack together and complement one another and serve different purposes. And the setup to me, again, is a little more confusing. And maybe that's just because of my familiarity with Neptune systems. I can't really speak to how this quote unquote collective works with regards to GHL, but from the general gist I get watching GHL users work their machinery on videos on YouTube, I feel like it is kind of more along the lines of a Neptune Systems type connection deal. I could be wrong. Um, but anyway, Hydros is really coming on the scene strong, at least conceptually, right? And we'll get into that. So um, those are the big three, and the one that I have the most knowledge of, and can do some coding on, and have all major core pieces of gear for, I would say, almost all, is the Neptune Systems Apex. So just understand, I'm coming at the controller conversation with my perspective colored by deep experience only existing in the whole Apex architecture, right? So, all right, this past week, we had two big launches, right? We had the Maven the Hydros Maven launched by CoralView, right? So the Maven is an auto testing unit that can test 5 things: alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, and phosphate. All 5 in one component, right? One module, if you will. And uniquely, there's a quote unquote head unit brain already built into the Maven. Okay. Also, apparently, and this came out a little bit after the initial, hullabaloo, it can test 2 tanks. So you have the ability to test 2 tanks with this one device, which is pretty compelling, right? Pretty compelling. So we'll just leave that where it is. The other thing, we'll come back to it. The other thing that launched was Trident's answer, okay, or Neptune's answer rather, which is the Trident NP, okay, for nitrate phosphate, the Trident NP, which is, I'll admit, a way less exciting name than the Hydros Maven, right? Maven's a pretty cool name, especially compared to Trident NP, but we'll leave the naming where it is for now. The Trident NP tests 2 things, nitrate and phosphate, and is intended to complement or form a complete 5-part testing package with the original Trident, which tests alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. I have the original Trident. Ironically enough, the day the Maven launch was announced, right? The day the Maven, the design and concept was released to the general public, was the same exact day that, for the first time after 4 years of continuous use, my Trident completely stopped working. So it was a pretty humorous, actually. The Trident just completely stopped working on me. Like it essentially like stopped when I put in new reagents. It was time to replace all 3 reagents. I replaced all 3 bottles of reagent and closed the drawer because the reagents in the Trident are contained within it, and did everything as I always do, guided the lines, etc. Nothing was kinked, nothing was weird, and it just didn't work. It was just like, cannot test or test fail or whatever kind of error it throws you. I took the whole thing apart. I'm okay with, like I'm not like, a crazy high level DIY guy or anything. I'm working on it. I like DIY now. I used to hate it and avoid it and be scared of it. Now I'm like all for it. But I have enough, technical prowess to feel pretty comfortable taking apart, a device that I understand what it does and then put it back together, right? And I have the awareness to stop if I think I'm going too far and I won't be able to get everything back together as it should. So I took the Trident apart and checked all the lines and disconnected everything and flushed it, flushed every single line individually with a syringe, and put it all back together. And I was like, I did it. And I started it and it was like, nope, test fail. So now it is going back to Neptune Systems in Pennsylvania now, because they have moved at the service part of what they do. And I'm sure the manufacturing, if it's not online yet, it will be soon, to Bethlehem area in Pennsylvania, to be adjacent or, share a facility with, I'm not sure on the details, with Ecotech. And I'm not sure, but I think somebody said it at one point that I heard AI is there as well. So kind of unsurprising, like, big venture capital firm takes you over. They want to get everything together, both for like cost and efficiency purposes, but also so that they can keep eyes on everything, because they want to watch everybody and every move that they make. So that's where everything is now. And that service, to send it back to have basically all the like core components swapped out and then have it sent back to me, you pay the shipping there. So that was $40, and then they refurbish it and with new parts and send you back your original Trident, and they pay the shipping return cost, but the service itself is $145, I think, to have that done. So, look, I've been manually testing since it went offline, and honestly, based on my manual testing, I think that the stability is actually a little bit increased in my tank. I've never had problems with the Trident like a lot of users have. A lot of users report like incredibly high failure rates and all kinds of problems with lines and reagents, and the cuvette's always getting too dirty, and all this. And mine ran like a tank for 4 years, and I was pretty happy with the runtime. I was like, all right, like 4 years is a pretty good run before anything weird happened. Don't love the service cost. I think it's a little bit high, especially since I'm paying to ship it there, but like whatever. I'm kind of, after 4 years, I know these things do need to be periodically serviced. So I was kind of like bracing myself for that anyway. If you want my thoughts on, this process. The other things that Neptune allows you to do, you can get a refurbished Trident that they have at their facility shipped out to you that someone else owned, and then you take that box and you put your Trident, your original Trident, in it and send it back. I didn't want to do that. Maybe call me a weirdo, but like I've seen a ton of bad stories about these like refurbished Tridents that were owned by other people. Like you just don't know what other people have done, how adjacent to salt it was, what components, may be, damaged that Neptune didn't know about based on the treatment of the device. Like, does the person smoke in their house around their tank? Like, I know some, I'm not judging anybody for smoking, but like, is there like smoke residue that got gunked up in the motors or something and it wasn't a readily seen thing? I just was uncomfortable. I was like, you know what? I don't know the history of that Trident. I want my own Trident back. So that's the route that I'm going with it, going for with it. And I'll actually, you know what? Before I get into like general thoughts on controllers, I will share some thoughts on this process that you go through with Neptune, just so people are aware, just so you know what to expect. And by the way, keep in mind as I share this, that we don't know yet. By the way, we don't know a lot of things about the Hydros Maven. There is a lot that we don't know. If they get all of this really, really, really right, it could be like a total like controller space of the industry game changer. Okay, but as far as I know, we don't have a release date on the Maven yet. Yeah, pretty sure not. As far as I can tell, you will be able to avoid one major problem with the Trident, which is the little test vial, called a cuvette, that the liquid gets spit into and mixed up with a little magnetic pill. In the promos for the Maven, that can be removed completely and cleaned out. And I think this was the greatest misstep of the Trident design, is that you cannot just, it's not an easy thing for a non-mechanically minded person to do to clean their cuvette, right? You know how the Trident is like, I don't know. The Trident always reminds me in Star Wars of the like troop carriers for the droid army in like the Phantom Menace. You know what I'm talking about? When they invade Naboo and the droids like unfold from these big red machines. Like that's kind of the shape of the Trident, right? Like it's got this big hump on the front and then it kind of like slopes down to a point on the back when the motor's housed in the back and the fan and all that and the connection points. So up at the very top of the peak in the front, that up there is where the cuvette is housed. And I don't know if they thought the design was like cool or whatever. It's really bulky, and also like you have to take off the whole housing, and the cuvette lid's like held on with electrical tape, and there's a microchip that is like, there's a microchip actually on either side of the cuvette, which is really close for like important electronics to be too liquid, in my opinion. That made me nervous, like taking the lid off and there's like droplets of reagent coming out, and I'm like, this is right, like there's microchips like 1 centimeter away, like on either side of this thing. It's just not a simple process if you're not a tech confident, mechanically confident person. So I was able to do it, and it took time and patience, but I was able to take Q-tip and really clean that out good, clean off the magnetic pill, put it all back together just as it was. I took pictures along the way. But after I reinstalled it and it didn't work, I reached out to Neptune Systems and started a ticket. And their response was, okay, step one, go into settings in Neptune Fusion and give us access to your whole system. And it says right there, like, this will allow Neptune support to control your whole system. Like, do you give access or whatever? I'm like, okay. So I turn on access and I'm like, all right, I turned on access to it. And I was in the house. The Trident didn't run, nothing changed, right? And not that I could tell. And then here comes the next email within like a couple hours. And the guy's like, all right, here's this link to part of a podcast video that some of our employees gave. And I want you to watch this 23-minute video. And your problem is probably addressed somewhere in this video. Now, mind you, I had typed a detailed email explaining my whole process and all the steps that I had taken to try to save myself from having to open a Neptune support ticket. So that was not read, presumably. Okay. So, which was not great. And so then I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, it's customer service at a big company, like whatever. So I go to watch this 23-minute video. There's no like chapters or anything like breaking up the different steps that are covered. And it was this guy, Carlos, and then that guy at Neptune, Paul, I think his name is. And the two of them were like talking about common issues that occur with the Neptune Trident. And Carlos seemed like a bang up dude. Like, they should have that guy like doing more, video content. I'll tell you what, like that Paul guy, he seems like a smart dude and all, but the way it's so off putting that, like, okay, you're giving this video out to people who are frustrated, who are upset, who are coming to you for a solution on their $700 machine that's not working correctly, right? And for me, it was like time was up. I knew eventually I'd have to get it serviced, but like other people are presumably having issues, right out of the gate and then coming there. The attitude that Paul guy has in that video, I can't believe that like that's the video they direct people to. Like, don't go listen to the video because it is drudgery. But if you want to have fun one day and you're really bored, you should watch that video because the air of superiority that Paul guy talks with while he's like things like when he's talking about guiding the sample lines in, he's like, yeah, people call here all the time, complain, oh, my Trident's not working, my Trident's not working. Well, it's because you did it wrong. You put the lines in wrong. That's your problem, guy. And it's like, whoa, hey, it's slightly hostile, dude. Like, we understand you're smarter than us, Paul. Got it. I was like, wow, if I were a different kind of person and my Trident didn't work out of the gate, I'd be really upset by the tone of this. So, yeah. So anyway, I go through that video and then I try the same stuff I've already tried just to try it. I mean, this is over like a 2-day span now. It runs into another day. So I go back to the guy and I'm like, hey, you still have connection to, my system. And I tried everything, in that video that was related to the problems I'm having and nothing worked. And the response just comes through and it's just like, okay, we think that based on the age of your Trident, you should probably just go ahead and get a replacement. And it's like, and of course they're like, you want to troubleshoot on the phone on like a video call. And it's like, no, I already did everything once. I told you that. Then you guided me to a video instructing me to do the same stuff again. I gave you access to my system for what reason? I'm not sure. And then basically you're like, all right, let's have a video call or you can just get a replacement. And I'm like, all right. Basically, I paid them $145 to just make the problem go away faster. I'll admit it. I'll be the first to admit it. I was that guy. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do all of these steps a third time while I'm stressing out on a video call with a Neptune Systems agent. You know what I mean? Like, so in my unesteemed opinion, like, I think that the way historically Neptune support has been for me, especially with regards to the Trident, like, I had a question early on with the Trident. I can't remember about what, like year 1. I resolved it on my own, but like I still dealt with them. And then I dealt with them again in a much deeper way for this. And if I had to guess, the Trident is sort of a nightmare for Neptune Systems, right? This like horrible double-edged sword. Like you have to imagine, like they're probably I do understand where Paul's coming from with having the frustrated tone to his voice, even just talking about the content again, because I can only imagine the amount of people who are not careful at all. They're like, I spent $700 for this. It should just work no matter what I do. There are people who feel that way, by the way. Like, I spent $700 for it. I'm paid as much for this as Apple products that I've paid for in the past. It should just work, right? And so they shove the drawer in, they kink a line when they do it, and before they've even like tried to see what the problem is themselves, they're calling Neptune Systems, screaming at them. I'm sure that that happens all the time. And that's why this is like a double-edged sword, right? Is that like, yeah, you got people buying reagents. Yeah, you got people buying new Tridents. It's a lot of money. There's plenty of cash to be had there. But also, it comes with this whole, like, I would love to know what the breakdown is of like all the calls that Neptune Systems gets for help from users. What is the percentage of Trident calls? I bet you it's the highest percentage, like the largest piece of the pie. If they were to break it down, I bet would be auto tester calls, 100%. So, yeah, I 100% believe that. If I was told that, I'd be like, yep, that makes sense. So anyway, that's where my story with the Trident currently is. I'm testing out CalMag once a day. I don't mind testing on my own. The Trident's great to have for like trends and stuff like that. Like an auto tester, in my opinion, the best thing about it is that you can get a bead on trends. And I always test my Trident with tank water. I never understood the calibration solution thing. It's contentious. Some people are like, you should never test with tank water. Always use the calibration. And other people are like, why would you use the calibration fluid? Why you have calibration fluid? Test your tank for the 3 major elements, and then just use your tank water for your auto tester to calibrate it. And the reason that I use tank water, one was that I've used it for years that way because it was much more expedient. Like I didn't have to worry about dipping my line into calibration fluid and then remembering to put it back in the tank and all this stuff. And I just figured that's I'll give myself credit. I figured out that methodology on my own. I was like, why wouldn't I just make my whole tank the calibration fluid? And I figured that one out, but it was cemented for me that this was a viable way of doing it when Jonas at ABC Reagents, who by the way is like a chemist at a big pharmaceutical company, like he knows his stuff. I think that the ABC Reagents, which by the way, if anybody doesn't know, it's reagents that were created by a chemist at a pharmaceutical company as a side business of his that will work in your auto tester. I use them for the Trident. He says they can be used in other auto testers too. And it is for a 6-month supply of it, half the price of the official Neptune Trident reagents. So yeah, I definitely only use that now. He initially shipped calibration fluid, and then he was like, I'm done shipping calibration fluid. I'm not doing that anymore. Everybody should test with tank water. And when that happened, I was like, okay, so like this thing that I've been doing, that actually tracks. Like that logic holds for a big name, chemist who's doing this awesome thing in the hobby. I'm going to go ahead and, just keep doing that forever and not question it. So like when somebody like that verifies what you're doing, it's like, okay, I'm going to keep doing that until like some very compelling evidence to the contrary comes out. So that's what I suggest is testing with tank water. I've kind of lost the plot a little bit. I apologize. Let's bring it back home. So, Trident NP. Okay, let's start talking about the pros and cons of the Trident NP. Since I'm a Neptune guy, like where do I? Now that I've brought you current with my journey with the Trident, the original Trident, the OG Trident, if you will. Where do I stand on the Trident NP? Where I stand with the Trident NP is I'm not getting one, right? And it's not an Aperture thing. It's like a side plus for me that I'm not supporting Aperture more. But the real reason I'm not getting one is because the Trident NP is just another Trident in a different shade of gray that I would have to find room for. And the Trident is not a small thing. It's not a small thing at all. I actually bought a new shelf for my Trident to try to fit it better underneath my stand. Also, the original Trident, I don't know if they've addressed this at all. The original Trident is not quiet. It has this like, ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk sound as the little are they called pinch valves? I don't know. Little valves pinch or little mechanisms pinch the lines so that you're not getting like leakage and contamination between lines. That's loud. It's like ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Also, there's this like, and I guess it's maybe the magnetic pill spinning. Or actually, you know what? When I ran it, I figured out what it was. It's just the little dose head in there. And it's a small dose head that presumably has to, pack some decent punch to be pulling all this water for years on end and all this reagent. So like that dose head in there has like a whine, like a background whiny noise, like, meh, like you can hear it. And my wife has rabbit ears, right? If you're a golfer, you know about people with rabbit ears. And she can't stand that. And so I have to put it under the stand, and I can still hear it, but it's underneath my stand, and it's muted enough that she has gotten used to periodically hearing it and doesn't complain. So, like, you know, basically, I know how difficult it is to fit a Trident under a stand and work around it when you're working with cords and when you're trying to mount a new controller box for a piece of gear, and like it's just taking up all this real estate. And even if you have it in like a dry cabinet to the side of the tank, it's still taking up a ton of room. It's still taking up a bunch of real estate. The thought of getting a second Trident and this hulking form factor, just no. I'm not gonna, especially for it to test two things that like really don't need to be tested every day, unless I can't really think of a application to test nitrate and phosphate like every day. Like that seems excessive, to an excessive amount of testing for nitrate and phosphate. I guess, I don't know, if you're running a coral farm or something, maybe you test nitrate and phosphate every day. It's just part of your daily routine, depending on like the amount of money that's at stake and like how you feel about testing frequency. But like for the average hobbyist, like a guy like me with a tank in front of you, like no, I'm not going to test nitrate and phosphate every day. I test phosphate probably more than most. I test phosphate every other day, and I test nitrate once a week. My nitrate has never gone above like 3 or 4, like ever. Like that was the biggest nitrate spike I ever had, was like 4. And so I don't know. By the way, I don't know why. I have to run phosphate medium, bring my phosphate down. Probably one of you guys who's smarter than me with this kind of nutrient game can, lend me some help there. Like, why do I have to reduce phosphate, but my nitrate is stable? I don't know. Stable low, by the way. So yeah, I'm not going to spend that ungodly amount of money and then start having to buy new reagents just to like test for something that really like I could probably test for phosphate if I wasn't like, paranoid about phosphate. I could test it like a couple times a week. I mean, as stable as it is for me, I could test it twice a week and be good. And nitrate, I mean, I'm not going to do this because I believe in testing. I test it once a week, but I could just conceivably not test nitrate based on my history. And like to this point with this particular tank in front of you, I would have been okay with nitrate because every time I've ever tested it, like I said, the highest it's ever been was like 4. So, that's where I stand on like the Trident NP. I think that, you know what, we'll get into more on like my thoughts about how this Trident NP shaped up and came to be in a little bit. Let's talk about the Maven, right? So the Maven, I can't stand here. I'm not going to get one. All right. I've decided. I debated it because I got really excited about the design of it. And I was like, oh man, I want to test it. I want to test it. I might just like sell the Trident and like use the Maven from now on. It does all 5 things. And then cooler heads prevail eventually. And like I sat with it for a while and I was like, all right, like, one, by the way, like we'll go through a couple cons with the Maven that people aren't talking about because it's not out, and it has the, by the way, it has the advantage of nobody knowing like anything about it, like hands-on use case, knowledge about it, right? We just have concept knowledge. And by the way, concept knowledge is impressive. Like it's really impressive. If they pull this off, it will be like gold standard, like absolutely. But as far as like cons that could shape up, so if you look at the promotional, like, art and stuff and photography and things of it, you can tell that they really, really, really want you to focus on the device itself, right? They really want all your focus to be only on the device itself, which ignores a reality that Neptune addressed in a different way with their Trident line than the Maven is addressing it. So you can see at the bottom of the promos and stuff that there are lines that just drop out the bottom of the picture. Like, yeah, the picture is impressive of the actual device, but where are those lines going? They're going to the reagents, right? So I don't know how many bottles of reagent it's going to, I mean, like, best case scenario, it's 1 bottle of reagent per element that it's testing. So 5 bottles of reagent, right? It totally depends on your setup. But for me, I would kind of be in trouble with 5 bottles of reagent that are just, you know, loose and I need to figure out what to do. Now, I'm sure that, like, I've talked about it before, but like the 3D printing, like light industrial and or home 3D printing arm of this hobby, oh man, those guys get stronger and stronger by the day. Some of those guys are like, they should just be considered heroes for the service of all the little specialized things that they take the time to create for the hobby, because there would not be solutions otherwise. Big manufacturers would not focus on solutions, even for their own products, with stuff like this. I think there'll probably be shelves that are eventually created to house the reagent bottles or some kind of bottle, for the reagents for the Maven. And that'll solve it for some people, right? Some people. But I am so jam-packed with gear in my system and the way I have everything laid out. I mean, I could get real creative, I'm sure, and figure out some way to finagle it, but it would not be an easy thing. And as fiddly as Neptune's solution is, which is this drawer that has lines that need to carefully be guided in and out of the Trident body, it is a solution, right? Like Paul said, as long as you do it right, like it just if you don't mess up as you're doing the drawer and as you're guiding these lines and nothing kinks and nothing gets, crushed or smashed or like, pushed out of position. If you're careful, the Trident stores its reagents within itself. And I think that is commendable, right? Like that is a commendable thing to think about. Like let's give a, the Trident was for alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, a pretty impressive all-in-one solution for that. And now the whole package, like if you were to get the whole package necessary to test all the big 5, I think it's a way less impressive thing. But talking about the Maven, like in possible cons, I don't know. I don't know about storing reagents. That's going to be kind of a weird thing, I think. And we're really going to lean on that like 3D printing arm of the hobby to help us out there. Pros of the Maven, though, like A, it's testing 5 things. B, it can test 2 tanks. C, you can pop the cuvette, little vial off of it and clean it out. Like, boom, game changer right there. Now in so many ways, you are not reliant upon some company that you're going to send this back for servicing to. Like, truly, like so many pieces of this, if they can pull it off and it works as well as we're all dreaming it will work, it will be, pretty dang impressive. I mean, it will be it will be a prime device that is on the list of so many hobbyists, right? Um, and I'll step back at this point now that we've gone through some of the pros and cons, and I kind of want to just talk about, before I get into deeper stuff about this launch, I kind of just want to talk about like controllers and auto testing in general. So this is a little disjointed, and I apologize. I didn't expect to shoot this today. I do that a lot. I'm like, I'm not going to shoot it today. I'll wait till later in the week, and then I'm like, but today's the perfect day. So that's what I'm doing today. Um, Stepping back a little, pulling the camera back and looking at just like controllers and auto testing and like automation and all of that whole like thought process. So first of all, and I've said it before, but I'll just state, there's no reason to spend ungodly amounts of money on like automation of this sort, control for everything from controller systems to auto testing to whatever. Like, you don't need to spend any money on that outside of like, I always champion having the ability to turn something off if something's going wrong at home. A pump, somehow falls off its magnet and is shooting water out of the tank, and your wife calls you while you're picking something up at the store and is like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, there's water shooting out from one of your propellers, like, like however somebody who's not in reef keeping would describe it. I always think to myself, like, I need the ability to save the tank and or like the psyche of a person who is not prepared to deal with this if I'm not in the home. So I do think that it's like pretty critically important to be able to at least on off switch something remotely on your tank. And with how cheap like a controllable Wi-Fi connected power strip is in 2024, I don't think that there's like a whole heck of a lot of compelling reason why you should not just think about that from the start with your tank, or eventually upgrade to that. Like, when your power strip starts to get, some salt residue on it or whatever, you're like, yeah, I could stand to get a new one. Get one with controllability, right? I think all of us at this point in, the span of humanity, like, we have access to some pretty amazing control factor, like controllability. And I think we should take advantage of it, at least on that base level. But if you prefer to just test your tank on your own, like, there's a lot of reefers out there who are like, I would not trust an auto tester to test for me in any capacity. There are people who are like, oh yeah, I'll trust an auto tester, but I won't trust the auto tester to adjust the dosing of supplements to my tank for me. I adjust the dosing. Then there are people who trust the whole thing. So there's so many different kinds of people. I've done many different things. What I have typically done is I verify the testing of the Trident on Saturday with all my other tank maintenance. And unless there's like a crazy spike somewhere in the elk cow mag range, I just kind of like let it do its thing. And then I adjust the dosing. I'll tweak dosing myself based on that. But I have, when I've been like away for a long period of time, like on vacation or whatever, I've just set it to adjust the dosing levels on its own, and it's done pretty good. I think one slipped out of the range and like kind of like threw me an error and was like, hey, you need to take control. And that's a nice functionality that it will like it will not just control it into the ground. When you're outside of a safe range that you set, it'll say, hey, step in, so like, take the wheel again. And I found success with that. I just prefer to kind of like pinpoint adjust this stuff on my own. But yeah, like, I'll use the Trident all week and then just verify on the weekends. And a lot of people say the Trident is like totally out of whack when the reagent bottle gets halfway empty or whatever. I got to be honest with you. I've never really found that. I've never found that like some massive like shift occurred in the readings or anything like that until this huge problem that I had recently. I never found that anything like that occurred, and I'm not saying it's not happening for people. I'm sure it is. There's enough like variance in production that there's got to be problems that crop up, especially with certain batches that go through or something was off in the factory or whatever. But it's kind of, in my opinion, um, you don't need any of this unless you have some kind of unique circumstance. Like, I'm traveling all the time for work. I get home late. I'm too tired to do it. I just want something to do it for me. and adjust my dosing while I'm busy for, 10 hours a day doing, like sales or some kind of intensive, job where you're traveling, whatever. Like if there's a certain circumstance that calls for it, okay, I understand. But I think that like most people do not need to feel compelled by the hype machine to go and get like, oh well, all the cool reefers have a Trident. All the cool reefers are getting Mavens. All the like, who cares? If you find relaxation, or you're just indifferent to testing it on your own every other day or once a week or whatever you do that you're finding success with, just keep testing it on your own and save yourself the massive money drop expense. And I do understand the argument that like, you buy a Trident for $700, but you're gonna buy $700 of HANA reagents eventually. Well, don't forget, getting an auto tester is a subscription plan. All right, and it doesn't matter if you're getting the reagents, like if in the case of the Trident, from Neptune or from ABC Reagents. If you want that thing to function, you are on a subscription plan for reagents indefinitely, right? So keep that in mind. Anybody looking for any auto tester ever. I don't know how the Maven's going to treat like its reagents. Like, is it going to be like, I think with the Alcatronic, Mastertronic, can't you use, as I ask no one who's, it's just me here, can't you use other test kit reagents and just set which test kit's reagents you're using? I think you can. I think I've seen Parker's Reef, which, by the way, great channel. I think I've seen Parker's Reef doing that with his Mastertronic. Like, he can just use what he wants for reagent. That, in my opinion, is really commendable when a company allows for that to occur, right? Yeah, I can't, I don't know what's going to happen with the Maven. I heard a rumor that it was going to be, that they were going to force you to buy their specific reagents for it, because there's a lot of money to be had in the subscription model, guys. As much money as there is to be had up front, there's a lot of money to be had in the subscription model. In the case that Hydros went that way and was like, oh yeah, we're going to make everybody absolutely be beholden to us to buy our brand of reagents, like, unless somebody comes in and subverts that the way that ABC Reagents did. And by the way, even if somebody does come in and subvert that model, the fact that like Hydros would create such a compelling competitor to the big dog on the block and then try to lock you in with that subscription model, I don't know. That would not make me super happy. I think the commendable thing to do would be to like not do that, right? Let's get off the auto testing for a second and just talk about the rest of the controller system. So what I use my controller system for, I'll just kind of go through my use case of the controller system. I use my controller system to do everything from, like, we'll start with auto testing. We've covered that plenty. I use it to refill my RODI and my saltwater mixing bin every Saturday. I have an automatic program where it handles that. I use it to have leak detection on the floor and inside the stand. I use it to test or to measure water level, have a real-time water level measurement. I use it because I have a Neptune return pump. I can use it to control my return pump, or get readings on my return pump and its current status. I use it to control some of the lighting that's underneath my cabinetry. I could go on. Let's see. I use it for multiple fail safes. So like I set up a bunch of different programs that are like, if water is detected specifically on the floor sensor next to the main tank, this, and this shuts off, and this notification is sent to let the user know something's wrong. Also, there are programs set up that are like, if the floor water sensor next to the RODI station is triggered, then this, and this turn off. Because I have sensors in there that automatically turn on like power heads and stuff after the auto refill occurs of like my saltwater mixing bin. So like if anything weird happened there, power head fell off and started shooting water out, or there was a crack or like something, like I'm turning off like equipment and heaters and like all sorts of like the fail-safe game. It's almost like a pastime, like thinking of awful things that could occur and then tracking down the code and coding everything out to react intelligently in a certain order to save the tank, right? Or at least mitigate the problem until you can arrive and save the day. So that to me, and again, like it can be argued that there are other ways of going about that. There are other products out there that are way cheaper, little Chinese water sensors that you can have that can connect to companion power strips that'll perform the same functions for way less cost. There's all kinds of arguments to be made again, and by the way, valid arguments that you don't need a controller system. However, at the end of the day, like I am a tech head, and I'm a total gearhead in this hobby, and I would have some kind of controller system, I think, no matter what, just because I love that kind of thing. I love this like purpose-built system with all these little like modules or components and different programs I can run, and like that's my happy place. Like that's a huge part of the hobby for me, is just tinkering and fiddling and setting up programs and settings, and like I can't stop. I'm totally addicted to that side of the hobby, right? It's not that way for some people. And if that's not you, I would really like, again, before buying into hype, I would slow down and be like, do I really need one of these? Or I'm just going to wait and really like in my free time watch a bunch of videos on the Apex and a bunch on the Hydros and a bunch on GHL's offerings. The Profilux, right, is what it's called. Like I'm gonna watch deep videos on these and really look at some people I trust and their comparisons of them before I pull the trigger on some starting aspects of the controller world, right? But yeah, my final position on controllers, I suppose, is that just like whole systems, regardless the depth you get into them, they're really good for like monitoring. That they're good for that, but you can get monitors on your own. They're really good for running programs and stuff to automate things and make your life easier. But you can achieve some of that with cheaper components, or you can just do it yourself, right? And some people just prefer to do things themselves. They only trust themselves. That's okay. Or they prefer to save the money and just spend the extra 30 minutes doing it themselves once a week. Like that's okay. And lastly, they're not necessary for success. They are not, but they are nice, right? They do offer convenience, especially if you are a technology or like, just gear mechanically minded person. Like they'll probably offer more enjoyment for you if you're one of those kind of people. So that's kind of where I would say I fall at the end of the day regarding controllers. So all right, let's kind of ease into comparing the Trident NP and the Maven, which is an interesting thing, right? All right, we've established that we don't even know if the Maven's going to work well, right? This thing is not out. By the way, we don't know if the Trident NP is going to work well, for what that's worth. However, considering it is like just another Trident with probably just some different componentry inside of it, slightly different, I'm assuming that it's probably going to work as well as the current Trident, which is to say it's going to be a contentious thing. The current Trident's contentious, its effectiveness is contentious, its reliability is contentious. Therefore, since they changed effectively nothing, I'm thinking that, it's probably going to be the same deal with the Trident NP, okay? Trident NP, you can store the reagents inside of it. Cool. If you have an Apex system, it matches up well with your Apex system, right? It's bulky. You're going to have to add bulk to your system. And if you're just entering this as a newbie completely, you're looking at buying just to gain like access to auto testing. You would have to buy, to get the big five, an original Trident, a Trident NP, which by the way costs $750. And you would have to buy an Apex Junior. That's your entry level. That, to me, is not a very good value. Not a very good value. Now, it's hard to judge value on the Maven because I don't think we have hard and fast pricing on this yet. I've seen a ton of pricing all over the board with the Maven. Okay, we'll talk about pricing in a second. Let's go. Let's hash back through what's valuable. So you can clean the components of it yourself and replace things yourself. You can take that cuvette off. That's a huge deal. You also have the ability to test 2 tanks. That's a huge deal. You have the beginning of a whole controller system if you want to build it out, because unlike the Apex that needs a separate brain unit, you have a brain unit built right into the Maven. That's a huge deal, right? You do have to juggle reagents. Like, that's going to be a weird thing for a lot of people. Like, you're going to have these disparate bottles of reagent that apparently, because they haven't shown us anything to the contrary, they're just expecting us to figure out. Like, the hobby will figure it out. And probably the 3D printers will figure it out. But right now, the reagents are just free-floating, and they're going to be bottles, and we're going to have to figure that out. We don't know the price. So, like, price for the Maven. Here's how I feel about price with the Maven. I think that if they go with, like, I don't know, whatever, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 premium price, considering what you're getting versus what your biggest competitor, the dominant dog in the industry, has put forth in this like 3-part package you need to buy to get the same exact functionality that you would get in auto testing, I would say that it's justified, right? Like, a high price tag, as much as people don't want to hear that, given like what their competition is, which is, for a new reefer coming in, I don't think it is a competition. I think you just buy the Maven, by the way. Like, what competition is there? Neptune's completely abandoned that segment of the hobby. People who are like, I want auto testing, and the way I get it through Neptune is this 3-part solution, and it's incredibly expensive. Or I can do a one-stop shop, and even if I set up a second tank, I can test a second tank. Yeah, like, for sure the Maven has won the new reefer. Like, as long as it works, right? Again, we don't know. If they pull it off and this thing really works as advertised, when they start showing it off and people start testing it, then yeah, they've won, right? But they got to get it right. And we've seen a lot of products with a lot of hype over the years that don't pan out. So I have my fingers crossed for them, because I think this is healthy for the hobby, this kind of competition, and somebody standing against the Aperture model that Neptune is currently suppressed under. I'll get into that. But honestly, like, I really think that if this works for Coral View, the new blood in the hobby that wants auto testing, with that asterisk, that wants auto testing really bad, and a lot of new reefers do. People don't want it. People see it as drudgery. They don't want to do it. I think that you're going to see this massive shift in focus over to the Hydros. Okay. However, all that said, with a high price justification that I think is justified, all that said, I think it would be kind of a game changer, and kind of like, I'm sure that this thing costs money to make and and put together, and it would cost a lot of money to R&D this thing, because it is very different. But if Hydros came out of the gate and had the stones to just say, you know what, we are going to absolutely eat the heart out of a huge segment of Neptune's power, they would price this thing at $800 or $900. Like, if they came out there and priced this thing at $799 or $899, I don't think they're going to do that. But if they did that, I hope it's not lost on them just how much market share and hype and power they would sap out of Neptune and Aperture. Because that's going to be the fallback position for Neptune fanboys and sponsored reefers and brand ambassadors, right? Is if if Hydros comes out and if Coral View comes out and is like, this device is $799, And then your alternative to get what we're giving you for $7.99 is to buy an Apex Junior head unit, buy a Trident, OG Trident, and then buy a Trident NP. Like, I'd like to see, like, some of these Neptune sponsored reefers, like CJ's Aquariums or whatever. What's your response to that? Like, oh man. I mean, there really isn't a good response to it. It's like they just absolutely took Neptune's shorts and ran away with them and left them standing there shivering. Like, that's the game. Well, that's the game for future people coming into the hobby and making this decision, right? That's a long game move. That's a foresight move, you know? I certainly think that under $1,000, they have the potential for this to occur, and the lower under 1,000 they go, the closer they're going to get to being able to like secure a win of that magnitude, right? Because on the other side of this coin, Neptune is not in a nimble position, okay? They're not in a position to respond to this. They just got completely uprooted from everything that they knew, and their operations moved to Pennsylvania. So, like, I'm sure that there are smart people who are critical to the company, who had their lives built in California, who are working remotely in California, right? And then there are people who are like, some critical people probably were like, fine, I'll move to Pennsylvania. And then some people who are less critical, and then they have a whole manufacturing force that they can bring to the table in Pennsylvania, right? Like that's good blue collar manufacturing area. They'll have bodies that are good at manufacturing that they can staff these lines with. But shifting all those operations and getting all of that online, and then having presumably some of your most critical experienced people who know so much about how the company works that they could leverage staying in California and working remotely. There is, like, as much as I would love like remote, because I believe that a lot of people should be able to work remotely. I truly do. There's a lot of intelligent people who should be able to work remotely and call those shots. There is something lost between like remote workers and the people who are on the ground. There's often something lost, and some inefficiencies and ineffectiveness. And it especially shows when there's upheaval going on. And this is a massive upheaval that is transpiring right now. I hope it's been transpiring for a while, by the way. So I'm hoping that like the Trident NP signifies that like that rough patch is like coming to a close, and this whole army of Neptune users, myself included, can like see some things coming back into stock soon. Maybe, I'm selfishly hoping that. Part of me hopes that like, this is really like that move, forcing that to happen, coupled with and taking everybody out of their comfort zone and uprooting this whole company, coupled with the fact that obviously this is like what I talked about with the Radeon in the last episode. Aperture's approach to this was the same as it was with the G6. Their approach was, again, this is literally like some MBA walking in the room like, I know how we're going to get rich, boys. Like, they are taking the same exact design, right? So no additional R&D and engineering needs to go into this thing. Besides maybe how to, I don't know, like, are they running 2 lines instead of 1 to 2? I mean, I don't know how many bottles of reagent are going to be in there. Are there 4 mini bottles? Are there 2 bottles? I don't know how they're going to test nitrate and phosphate, how that's going to all shake out. But the engineering and the R&D required to like take an OG Trident and change it into a Trident NP, that is literally the most minimal effort that they ever could have put into this, right? And when the question was inevitably asked by talented people at Neptune Systems, like, what are users going to do? The Trident's pretty big. Like, most reefers are not like wealthy reefers that have all this space and luxury to just be adding another Trident, just slapping it in next to the other one. also to pay the expense of 2 Tridents plus a head unit. Like, is this really the best route to go? Aperture's response clearly was, we don't care. And that's what I said before, and I'll say it again. They don't care. They're catering to the elite few who have the luxury of space for this stuff, who have the luxury of free gear if they're sponsored, which they sponsor lots of people to make sure that this stuff is hyped, but also they have the luxury of having the income free for them to use to invest in another Trident unit to cover all 5 elements, right? And they're just like, yeah, that's it. Like, that's it. People who have bought thousands of dollars in Neptune gear, they'll just shut up and eventually buy one if they really want to automate this. And then we'll sell a bunch of these to rich people. And like, that's what we care about. Like, that's it. There's enough people in that top bracket of this elite bracket in what is, like, compared to many hobbies, a pretty affluent hobby. I mean, you gotta have money or be willing to make sacrifices in your life to direct dollars to reef keeping if you want to be in this hobby long term. That is how it is. Even for small time reefers, it requires a priority redirect of funds, or it requires you having a nice big fat paycheck. And I'm not coming at you for being a successful person and having the money to just go drop $470 on an MP40. Still the worst value ever in reef keeping, by the way. Absolutely outrageous. But like, the fact that this was their approach after where I've seen pricing go on stuff like the MP40, after what I've seen go on with like the G6, which is just like a reskin of the G5, with some new diodes slapped into it, and hype on spread because we, push the board a little bit closer to the lens. Ooh. And then here we go with the Trident, right? Like, this is literally par for the Aperture course, right? It's probably decided on the golf course, right? Like, it just feels like, 2 guys hemming and hawing with Cuban cigars as they get into the cart. We'll just do the same thing again, right? With a couple different things to test inside of it. That's what it feels like. They don't care. They don't care. So effectively, minimal R&D went into this, and they're just going to keep churning out the same body in a slightly different color, and they're like, we're gonna get rich, boys. We're just gonna get richer and richer. And it's like, okay, by the way, as they gobble up control through exclusive partnerships and any other acquisitions that they can manage to rope into the umbrella, right? It's unbelievable to me. So the Maven and Hydros Coral View, I want them to understand, if they can make this thing work effectively like we all hope they can. Because, by the way, I bet you even Neptune fanboys who are getting free gear to talk about and hype Neptune, they got to be looking at the Trident, which they're not talking about because, why would they do that? But they have to be looking at it like, wow, that is pretty cool. It is cool. Coral View, it's awesome. It is. It is a great design conceptually. So one, we got to make it happen and not indefinitely delay it, but also not just force it out before it's ready. I'd much rather wait for something to be ready. It's kind of like video games. Like, I used to be a video game guy before I had a kid, and I leave everything on the field behind me to get to my bed at the end of the day every day. But I always remembered like games coming out that were not ready to come out, and how damaging that is to the creator, right? Like that company that created that video game that wasn't ready, and it launched full of bugs and with a really limited scope of what it can do, and everybody's needing to put in tickets to get stuff, to figure out what's going on or whatever. That was always like, that's something that would sink ships of smaller game companies. Well, this is kind of the same thing. Like, this thing, I want it to come out in time to pose massive competition and really take some market share from Neptune, because I think it can. And I think that the reef keeping hobby needs that to happen. So, like, unfortunately, as much as I want this to come out as soon as possible, if it's not quite ready and there's still things that are getting worked out and you're not 100% on it, again, who am I? I'm some guy. But what I would say to CoralView is wait until it's ready. Get it right the first time. Like, even if you sacrifice some extra share and people just end up gritting their teeth and pulling the trigger on the Trident NP instead of going with the Maven, like, get it right the first time, and it will pay dividends for so long if you do. And also, the other thing that I would just cross my fingers for, and again, like, somebody out there might know pricing. Maybe pricing came out while I was giving this podcast, but if they can price this thing, the lower they go under $1,000, I mean, we're talking like, a massive thorn, more than a thorn. That's like ramming a wooden stake right into Aperture's side. And I think it's critically important, because if Aperture is going to be around, and I think they're going to be around, Chewy hasn't come calling yet, right? So, like, I think they're going to be around. If they're going to be around for a while and they're just going to have to keep primping themselves for sale to some big conglomerate, and that's what they're going to do, then all of us who are already thousands of dollars invested in that gear, like, if they're going to be around and nobody's going to scoop them, then they need to start feeling pressure. Their CEO needs to start feeling pressure. I want her sweating over Maven sales, right? I want her sweating over Trident NP crashing through the floor, and have the people over her at Bertram like, hey, what's going on there? I thought this was like a big, cool new device. Why aren't more people buying it? What's going on in that controller space? This is a big part of what we're doing. The more these people who care only about the elite few reefers that can afford to sink thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars without a blink of an eye into all their overhyped products and ignore the rest of us, the more I hope for pressure on these people, because it is going to make the hobby better for everybody, right? Like, I want maximum pressure to return this atmosphere to a true, filled with competition and innovation, like, fire of economic push and pull, because that's what yields better products for everybody. And right now, CoralView is bringing the heat. They're bringing it conceptually. So, CoralView, get it right, get it done, and for the love of all that is holy in the eyes of Reef Jesus, please consider, even though you could and you would still make sales, please consider bringing that price into a competitive zone that represents that wooden stake right into Aperture's back. Like, please. All right? I understand this is some fiery talk, guys, but to me, this situation that we're in right now, where, like, the G6 is on tenuous ground after people have sat with it for a few years, the prices on everything just keep getting hiked. Aperture is just counting their dollars, just, putting more money into the hype machine every day, sponsoring more reefers to hype every day. But the cracks are starting to appear. Like, oh, your big reveal was like a quieter dosing pump, which is what it should have been in the first place. Like, their little upgrade to the dose, that's what the dose always should have been. So thanks for doing what it should have been in the first place. And then, like, we're going to do the same exact thing for Trident Part 2, and we're going to charge $750 for it, and you have to buy a head unit, and you have to figure out where to store it, and you have to, like, what? Like, the cracks are starting to appear. I've seen more average reefers look at this Trident NP versus Maven situation. People who I look at their Instagram profile and it's all Aperture hype. I've seen more comments from people like that going, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Like, the cracks are starting to appear. You know what else was interesting? This was fascinating to me. So, Reef Factory, and again, I won't get into the deep speculation on the Reef Factory, situation. I think I know what happened. I think everybody kind of knows what happened, but Reef Factory they did a little backstabbing, right? It was a little backstabbing, and they hopped over and aligned themselves with BRS as exclusive distributor, or their main distributor, or their, in America, after they had committed to a different distributor, right? A smaller distributor. So all these Reef Factory products hit the pages of BRS on the website, but there's no auto tester, right? Because Reef Factory sells an auto tester, right? I don't think it's a very good auto tester. I think it's ridiculously overpriced to test one thing at a time. That's really weak. That's weak sauce in my book. However, they offered a competing product, an alternative thing that you could get to going with a Trident NP. And interestingly, that auto tester, it just wasn't showing up alongside the other Reef Factory products. Where could that be? Was it possibly buried out in the warehouse under a couple pallets of Neptune Tridents? I think so, because interestingly, now that the Trident NP pricing was dropped and they're unveiling it and getting ready to sell it, oh, now that we all know that there's a bet, and by the way, the Trident NP and the Trident are better options than buying a bunch of Reef Factories auto testers. But now that everybody's for sure that we all know that, only now, today, the 16th of April, did BRS post the Reef Factory auto tester for sale. Oh, I see what they did there. Some worker out in there in the warehouse. Oh, hey guys, did you know Reef Factory has an auto tester? Look, we buried it under these Tridents. Oh, that was just a mistake. Whoops. Yeah. So Reef Factory and everybody else who's considering aligning your company with these people and going exclusive and letting them control your distribution, just understand that if you ever want to have something that competes or that they perceive to compete with anything that they're putting out there, understand that that's how you're going to be treated. All right? Because that's what they do. This is what these people do. They have higher ups that work 7 days a week, 365 days a year with their will bent on doing this kind of stuff. And they have armies of marketing teams and decision makers at the lower levels working 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, doing all bent on keeping the hype machine rolling and suppressing and controlling competition in every possible sector. This is what they do. So, all right, I understand it. Again, guys, I understand this is a lot of heat. I understand I'm starting to bring the heat now, but now I'm seeing it. Like every turn that I take in this hobby, I'm seeing it again and again and again. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the hobby focusing on the elite few or the one income bracket that can afford to drop $470 on an MP40. I'm sick of the most powerful entity in the hobby only caring about them because they can fund the means to their end, which is presenting themselves to Chewy, right? Oh, they're making eyes at Chewy. It's happening. So, yeah, that's what I want to say about Reef Factory. And then I had on my kind of little list of things to go through regarding all this. Thoughts of what I do in my current situation, which I kind of covered, and also what I do if I were just entering the market for auto testing. And I kind of covered that too. But just to reiterate, one, what I'm going to do in my current situation is not buy the Trident NP. No way. No way. And I'm going to keep testing a couple times a week with my hand test kit, and I'm going to be good to go. I don't think people should buy it. I think it's utterly and completely disrespectful what they did. zero R&D, right? Maybe again, maybe in the most weird circumstance where like, if you're taking care of other people's fish tanks and you need to have monitoring on them over weeks before you go back or whatever, or like you're traveling all the time for your job, or maybe there are situations, but I think most people should draw a line here. Most Neptune users should draw a line and start demanding better design, better concepts, actual innovation. What a joke that they called this real innovation in their ad. Real innovation, really? And I think that people should draw the line. And by the way, on the pricing, and say $749. $749 to test two things. And it's the same exact body, the same exact design. You're making me double the footprint of my testing. And again, if you're new coming in, you have to do that with two Tridents and then buy a head unit. It's wrong. And again, I've said it 100 times. Aperture, don't care. So make them care. Draw the line. This is the time, right? This is the most vulnerable I've seen them because they have overstepped their bounds in terms of greed, right? Maybe they'll prove me wrong. Maybe everybody will scramble out there and buy the Trident NP. But I think this is maybe the last straw for a lot of people because it is bold-faced disrespect, right? Two, what would I do if I were just entering the market for a controller? The second part of this little note that I have, again, you already know. As long as the Maven works, as long as they bring this thing to fruition, and as long as it is a reasonable price, like there's an outside chance, I don't think it'll happen, that they just price this thing crazy high, $1,800 to $2,000 range or something. And again, like I don't think that's justified, but like I could see how some bean counters could think that that's justified. I don't detect as many bean counters at CoralView as I do at BRS by a long shot, but like, I hope that it doesn't go that way. As long as it doesn't, and it's a reasonable price, especially if it is like a take down the Trident price, right? If they go there, if they have the stones to go there and really capture people, then yeah, this, as long as it works and as long as the price is right, yeah, it is an absolute no-brainer, right? It is a no-brainer. Two tanks that you can test, 5 things that are being tested. You can take it apart, change out parts, clean things yourself. All of it connected through a controller head unit that is embedded within the device, the single device itself. And the one thing that you're juggling is, figuring out a solution for your reagent storage bottles, right? And the solution for many of those is gonna, or for many people who are gonna face that, is go to the 3D printing side of reefing and have them create something for you in the bottles you want to use, or like, if they are going to like lock in the reagents, which unfortunately it could very well happen, then like, there's going to be standard things out there that you can buy to kind of create a little shelf or nook or whatever where you can store this stuff. Like, solutions will be made. But yeah, it's a no-brainer. Like, it's a no-brainer. And I think that because new reefers seem to be so averse to testing on their own, which is really interesting because like a lot of older reefers will look at me 6 years in and say, dude, you're a new reefer. And like, yeah, I have an auto tester because like, again, as you guys know, at one point in my life, I made a lot of money and traveled and worked a lot for that money. I was always gone. So I wanted something that was giving me trends so I understood what was happening and could like, head off any trouble that was happening while I was out doing my job. Well, now that I'm around, like most people are around, most people are checking in at home or having a few hours of free time every night, as long as you have like a normal career, right? A sane career. So, in those cases, like, yeah, I mean, like you're testing on your own is going to be, a totally viable thing for you to do instead of going down like the deep path of getting 2 Tridents and an auto test or a head unit and all that. The Maven closes so many gaps but young reefers are going to drift to it. They just are, right? They just are. They're going to drift over to the Maven for sure because of the prevalence of auto testing and the desire to have auto testers on tanks that I'm seeing now in younger reefers, right? I have no issue doing manual tests on my own, but I sense an issue with that for a lot of younger people. So again, like, younger people have less money too, Coral View. So if you price it lower, you're going to capture more. I've talked for too long. I'm starting to get, the threads are starting to fray. But that's what I have to say about this whole situation. I think it's a very dynamic thing that's occurring in the controller space in this hobby. And I think that on the aperture front, it represents, or it serves to further prove who they care about and what their end goal is at the expense of all the rest of us and the greater hobby, right? Like, that's what's going on here. So that's what I have to say about it. I'm going to kind of like abruptly end it because I really have like talked myself out on this one and talked myself in a couple circles there at the end. So I apologize if I sort of lost the plot at a couple points. It's just a ton. It's a ton to get through. I have a lot of emotions about a lot of this stuff because I'm arguably like passionate to a point that I even hurt my ability to convey things with clarity at times because I'm thinking so far ahead with such excitement and passion about things that I like start to stumble. So before I stumble along any further, I'm going to end this episode. We've gone for like an hour and a half anyway. Guys, I also want to say, let me just take a breath, step away from the subject matter. I want you guys to know that this podcast is like the greatest, like one of the greatest thrills of my life, being able to do this, and like one of the greatest honors of my life, having hundreds of people listen to this every week from all over the world. Like, it really is. I've expressed gratitude before, but like now that I've done this, you know, some 7 episodes into it, and like the support is holding, and you guys are fully engaged, and in many cases like backing a lot of the different things that I believe, and you know, trying to, I see some of you trying to, you know, spread the message of finding alternatives and finding a way to do things cheaper and DIY and without the reef tax involved, and start to try to redirect some of the flow of funds away from these entities that are eroding the hobby and direct them towards causes that deserve those dollars, that deserve your hard-earned money. It means so much to me, and I'm sad to say this and like have to, I'm not stepping away, by the way. I'm not stopping, but I have to explain something to everybody. Like, I, being a quite a low paid adjunct instructor at a large public university, I have to say that like it's going to be tough for me over the summer, and we're closing in on summer. I mean, we're in the last like month of classes, and the grading load's picking up. So I don't know if it's going to be like every week, right? Coming up here shortly. And then over the summer, in order for my family to stay afloat, I have to work summer classes. A lot of teachers, especially tenured professors, like don't have to do that. I must work summer classes to keep us afloat. And what I do is generally a mix of like teaching on campus, like long form courses, because like that semester is shorter and you got to condense things. And then also like I'll do online classes, and those are all condensed as well for the shorter semester. And so the way it all shakes out is like my wife works a traditional 8 to 5 job. So I'm with my kid and also trying to like grade papers and, you know, produce lectures and stuff for my online courses, and then having to like drop the kid with like the one relative that lives within an hour of us and like run and do a class, and then run and get my kid. And like basically what I'm saying is, with a 5-year-old scampering around and like the condensed workload that I'm going to have, I don't know how regularly We the Reefers is going to occur over the summer months. All right. I'm talking like, you know, like latter half of May through like mid-August. Like, I don't know how surefire a week-to-week thing is going to be for me. It might be a month-to-month kind of deal. It might be a couple times a month. But like I've so enjoyed getting these out at a regular clip and watching you guys waiting for this, asking me what day is it going to come out this week. Like that kind of stuff matters tremendously to me because I am passionate about and believe in the message or various messages that I'm carrying, and I believe in the common reefer and having something for us, right? But just understand that like unfortunately my reality of the personal side of my world, it is an up and down thing because of my career. So like this is just a pre-apology if I can't keep the week-to-week schedule over the warm months. But as soon as not that it's not warm in Mississippi all the way into October, you're still sweating. But like, you know what I mean? Like when we get back into like the end of August and like into the regular academic year, the schedule smooths out and my kid's back in school and like it'll be a more regular clip. But I just want to brace everybody. Like eventually it is going to be kind of a hit or miss thing for a few months before it gets back on track. So I appreciate you all so very much. And it really is. This has been everything to date regarding doing this podcast has really it enhances my life. You guys enhance my life, and I really appreciate it. So keep on reefing on. Have a great week, and get your maintenance done this weekend. All right. Talk to you guys soon.